joining us for our 2032 conversation on the future of justice and allyship. Today, we're gonna start off with our featured artist of the week, Spring Brooks, who just released a lyric video and her most recent record as well. And we're gonna play some of her music until everyone kind of joins in. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Today, we're gonna start. Please do introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know your name, where you're joining us from, and why are you resilient? All right, thank you.
These times they're changing, or maybe they isn't. See, the sky's been raining for way too long. Hope to change the world. I'm just trying to leave my mark. The same sun shines on us all, but some of us burn while you lie in the shade, just to watch me work. I live in those times. Can't forget all those crimes. I will gladly move on. Right after I'm caught up. Hope to change the world. Just to run and leave my mark. The same sun shines on us all, but some of us burn while you lie in the shade. Just watch me work.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our 2032 conversations. We want to welcome you into this space. This is a weekly event that we host for Resilience 2032. And the purpose of these events is to help us look to the future and write our social media theater experience, which will launch in August, and invite you to play an active role in the year 2032. Today, we are doing things a little bit differently. We're going to take a little bit more time and space for reflection. And we are extremely grateful for the amazing group of women that are going to be sharing with you today. We're very excited to have Fatou Wurie, Charisse Myers, and Makeda Gershenson will also be leading us through a reflection moment. And that video that you just watched was from Spring Brooks. So I won't take too much time before we dive in today.
Yes, and Christy put in Spring Brooks' information in the chat. You can follow her on social media and support her work and her music. She's a blues singer based in New York. And as Christy mentioned, at Resilience, we look into the future to imagine what can be created. And to do so, we must first acknowledge our past and our present. And it is our responsibility to acknowledge how the current systems are failing and to work towards reconciliation. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Makeda Gershenson, who is the founder of Good, Better, Best, and who is a member of our Brain Trust. She's been a previous panelist, and we are very grateful for her work and her guidance and her brain. Makeda, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you for that beautiful song, Spring Brooks, and to Noor and Christy for the invitation to join you today for some mindful moments. We are going to ground ourselves for today's conversation by first acknowledging the land that I'm calling in from. So acknowledging the land is the process of deliberately naming that this is Indigenous land and Indigenous people have rights to this land. So I want to acknowledge the land of the Lenape and Canarsie First Nations people. And this is the land that I am occupying in this body, living, working, and learning on this land. And part of our learning and part of our work is to name the tragedy of racism and anti-Black violence. So for the next 8 minutes, 46 seconds, I'll be calling some of the names who have lost their lives to police brutality. And we must increase our awareness and address our silence if we're to create a just future. So I invite you to take a few deep breaths. And just notice how your body feels in this moment. Letting your next breath be the deepest breath you have taken today. Breonna Taylor, Justin Howell, Sean Monterosa, Jamel Floyd, Walter Scott, Jordan Davis, John Crawford III, Ezell Ford, Dante Parker, Michelle Cuso, Laquan McDonald, Rumaine Brisbane, Albert Joseph Davis, Darius Stewart, we see you. George Floyd, Billy Ray Davis, Samuel Du Bois, Michael Sabi, Brian Keith Day, Christian Taylor, Troy Robinson, Patterson Brown, William Chapman II, Joseph Mann, George Mann, Mary Trujillo, Jordan Edwards, Ronell Foster, Stephon Clark, Antoine Rose II, Tamir Rice, we see you. Ashams Farrow Manley, Tanisha Anderson, Salvad Ellswood, Felix Kumi, Aaron Bailey, Keith Harrison McLeod, Junior Prosper, Sean Bell, Lamontez Jones, Jerome Reed, Eric Harris, Walter Scott, Dominic Hutchinson, Maya Hall, Eric Garner, we see you. Philip White, Brendan Glenn, Victor Manuel La Rosa, Jonathan Sanders, Freddie Blue, Natasha McKenna, Tony Robinson, Anthony Hill, Anthony Ashford, Troy Robinson, Alonzo Smith, Tyree Crawford, India Kager, Levante Biggs, Sandra Bland, we see you, Michael Lee Marshall, Jamar Clark, Richard Perkins, Nathaniel Harris Pickett, Benny Lee Tiger, Miguel Espinal, Michael Noel, Kevin Mathers, Betty Jones, Quintonio LeGrier, Keith Childress Jr., Janet Wilson, Keith Hicks, Randy Nelson, Michael Brown, we see you, and Trony Scott, Wendell Celestine, David Joseph, Kaylin Rockmore, Dejan Perkins, Christopher Davis, Marco Loud, Peter Gaines, Tori Robinson, Darius Robinson, DeMarcus Seamer, Willie Tillman, Terrell Thomas, Trayvon Martin, we see you, Isabel Smith, Alton Sterling, Valandro Castile, Terrence Crutcher, Paul O'Neill, Alteria Woods, both M. Jeans, Pamela Turner, Dominique Clayton, Atiana Jefferson, Christopher Whitfield, Christopher McCorvey, Eric Reason, Michael Lorenz Dean, Alexia Christian, Ahmad Arbery, and so many, many more. We see you. Take a few deep breaths. Find your breath in this moment. Bring your awareness back to this space, to this body, to our intention in coming together. And notice how the body feels. Notice how the mind feels. George Floyd's memorial was held 2 days ago, and yesterday would have marked Breonna Taylor's 27th birthday. Before we can change the world, we have to see the world as it is. And the anti-Black brutality must stop. It's essential to our humanity. It is essential to our future. It is essential to our children and our children's children. Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Makeda. That was 8 minutes and 46 seconds. May they rest in peace and power. And with that, I am honored to hand it over to a powerful storyteller and ultimate disruptivist, Fatou Wurie, who is an activist and a social justice advocate that is from Sierra Leone, currently residing in Brooklyn. She is a moth storyteller and a speaker with us tonight, and I'm gonna hand it over to her.
Thank you, Noor. Thank you, Makeda, for grounding us, for uplifting our brothers and sisters, the known, the unknowns, up in prayer, to community for holding space. I'm going to share my prayer and what grounds me as a Sierra Leonean, divorced from my country for many years due to a civil war, and standing in solidarity with America, with all Black peoples, as our liberation and everything else is so intertwined. When you hear Salon in the poem, it's a mixture of English and Creole, it means Sierra Leone. So I hope it resonates. Mamayo, yeah. We don't die, 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 oh, yeah. Bear with me, bear with me, bear with me. Bear with me, bear with me, bear with me. Bear with me, bear with me, bear with me. My dreams are still realities that nestle in profanities as I smell blood they extract from limbs in deadened streams. The Red Sea cries as Babylon sails, but I'm in sweet, sweet Salon today where assailed voices don't pass Freetown. So I'm asking freed slaves to come chain and take me away. Freed slaves come chain and take me away to a land where pain isn't gain and rain isn't placed into the fast lane of destruction. Mamayo, yeah. We don't cry, 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 oh, yeah. My mother's bosom warm with security rocks me back and forth and back, gestating me back to reality, but my body has memory. The day they divided my legs, they forced my honeycomb to burst, explode, they shot Papa. I say, Adi yeri, 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 uncle don't run away to green bushes. Mama come, mama come. And so mama comes and she rocks me back into the present. But here in the present, she soothes and says, nah, dream, you did dream, but it feels so damn real that this might be my last meal. Paradise done gone, nah, sweet, sweet Salon. People often ask me, where are you from? Is that where there was a war, where they killed Africans and Black bodies? And I often say, where were you when they asked me short sleeve or long sleeve, asked me to love one part of me? Where were you when they bitch slapped me and said raped or pounded my dear? Choose, which will you be? Where were you when they burnt houses down? Where were you when they burned schools down, intellects and judges down, children and brightened dreams down? Disempowered minds, political turnarounds left all of us in the dog pound. So bear with me when I cry in the night. Bear with me when I'm still angry deep inside. Bear with me when I smoke or drink to escape. Bear with me when I freak out in bed. Bear with me when my heart violates to be heard. Bear with me when I scream. Sweet salon, bear with me. Our stories are still spilling. Sweet salon, bear with me. Death is still grieving. Then say salon picking there, una come back, una forgive. Then say salon picking there, una come back, una forget. Bear with me if I cannot forgive. Bear with me if I cannot forget. For my body, his body, her body, your body, my body, her body, your body, my body, our bodies, your body, my body has memory. So bear with me, bear with me, bear with me. Thank you.
Wow. I wish that everyone's applauding for you, Fatou. That was so powerful. Thank you for sharing that with us today. Fatou is a panelist with us today. She is an experienced grassroots organizer. She's an advocate who has learned the art and science of community development firsthand in a range of cultures and settings. She has lived all over the world and worked all over the world, from remote villages to the highest level of the United Nations. She is a respected international professional with an aptitude for innovation and connecting dots across generations, ideologies, and sectors. Her work has been featured by Amnesty International, Ebola Deeply, National Geographic, the Huffington Post, the Open Society Foundation, among many, many others. She is a contributor and curator of the Moth's highly selective story compilation, often placed on bestseller lists. She sits on the Rainbow Rape Crisis Center, on the board of the Rainbow Race Crisis Center, and is an Abshire Inamuri International Fellow. We are also joined by Charisse Myers, who has been part of the resilience team and contributing a lot of her energy and her efforts with us. She is a multicultural marketing expert that spent the last few years working in the entertainment industry, ensuring that the content that is created is reaching diversified audiences. Outside of her profession, she is an advisor to Platform, she's also a TV producer at Hillsong NYC, and an adult advisor to the YMCA MEUN program. She is the co-founder of Beyond the Book, a book club with the goal of creating dialogue and relationships that expand beyond the Book of the Month. She's worked on film and TV projects for networks and studios, including Showtime, Amazon, Netflix, Disney, Paramount Pictures, HBO, and Hulu. Thank you both for being with us today for our conversation on the future of justice and allyship. I'd love to start us off with a conversation with your thoughts, Charisse, in light of the rapid changes in the midst of both the pandemic as well as the racism pandemic. What do you see clearly that you couldn't see 3 months ago?
First off, thank you so much for having me, and Fatou and Makeda, thank you for opening with such beautiful works. It's really appreciated on days like today. And for me, what do I see? What have I seen differently, or have been able to just acknowledge it's strange in the last 3 months? For me, I think it's that America specifically is telling on itself. We're telling on ourselves. And I mean that in the sense that in the midst of this virus, so many things that we said or we were told was not possible resources that we said were not available, things that, you know, whether it was cleaning, simplest of things from cleaning the subways to having unemployment be an affordable rate, like so many different things that we were told were impossible, all of a sudden are very tangible. And it's in this moment of extreme crisis in which that's been proved. And that is like beyond me at this moment, looking at the fact that unemployment rates, rates are at all-time high. And yet the federal government is giving an extra $600 a week to people on unemployment, and that number is not just arbitrary. That was determined by what amount of money would need to sustain life, to have a livable wage, but yet people are working minimum wage jobs that are far below that, and that's a shame. So that's those areas. But just thinking as it relates to COVID, as it relates to race, all the things that we were told were impossible. We told we're not having enough resources to have enough PPE for workers in hospitals, to not having enough ventilators, but yet we're able to militarize different states with the snap of a finger is insane. Is like absolutely insane to think that it's not about lack of funds, it's about priority. It's about prioritizing certain sectors or spaces over others, over human life frequently. And to me has never been more apparent than it has been now, for sure. But yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you. I want to remind everyone that we would love for you to share your questions and your comments in the chat. So do keep your questions and your thoughts coming. Fatou, what has been something that has become apparent to you that you see clearly now that you couldn't see a few months ago?
If you had told me 3 months ago that as an African living in America, African governments around the continent, Black diaspora communities across Europe, all the way to Asia, would be releasing statements talking about anti-Blackness and saying to America, right? The land of the free for all, the beacon of democracy, our biggest donors, we're constantly begging, come and, you're sending your expertise to our countries to tell us how to be democratic and serve our people. We are now writing letters and we are saying that, Black lives matter. We are holding the mirror up. And not only are we holding the mirror up to America and white America, we as Africans, we as Black peoples across the world are also being forced to center the issues that affect all of us. If you had told me that, that would be possible in 2020, when in 2019, where I work, I was going up and down floor 1 to floor 14, saying that Black women are dying in this institution and no one was listening. Now, if it wasn't for COVID, I would be doing that right now. And trust me, even if they didn't want to listen, they would have to act on it. To tell me that a year later, this would be happening. The mirror is up. And Black people are having to also have difficult conversations with themselves. I have goosebumps just thinking about it. On a very spiritual level, I am like, the forces where not only are we going to get the world to stop and humble everybody, we are then going to center Black people in this. And we're centering ourselves, and we're talking, and we're demanding, and everyone can ask the question as to what's going to happen, what kind of change is really going to happen. I don't care. The point is, when in recent history has the entire world had to grapple, whether they have the language or not, around anti-Blackness, around systems that are deliberately, like Charisse is saying, all of a sudden, oh shit, all this stuff is unavailable, right? That we are now looking at redistribution, we're looking at resources. We are all in a very intimate, colloquial way, understanding power, privilege, white supremacy, anti-Blackness, breaking down racism and not saying it's just not about racism, blanket racism, people of color racism, whatever, but we're centering, even linguistically, the language is shifting. If you had said that to me, that the United Nations, some parts of the United Nations would release statements saying that Black lives matter. Black communities matter. Anti-Blackness that fuels racism is a no-no. I'd have been like, you damn crazy. It is an incredibly, incredibly painful and yet incredibly precious time. It's a moment that we're going to look back on, and there's so much to unpack. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. I want to go back to unpacking language. And even if you mentioned, like, even if they didn't have the language to use, what language should what do you think, like, what language should we be using as allies? This morning I heard a podcast with Resma Menakem, who is a therapist and trauma specialist. And it was an an episode with Krista Tippett on being. I'm going to post it in the chat in a sec. But he's an expert around body trauma, like unpacking trauma in our bodies as well. And he refers to people of color as people of culture. Because if we are to survive as a country, it is inside our bodies where this conflict needs to be resolved. That the vital, I'm quoting him, that the vital white supremacy is in our nervous systems. And he says, we must, yes. Wait, I'm going to put in the quote in the chat, but I thought it was very fascinating, his introduction of the word culture, like people of culture, to humanize the way that we refer to each other based on our skin color, in light of like our ancestors learning that that's how, that is the naming, that's the name that the movement has today. Like, what does that say about our evolution of humanity? I was curious for your thoughts on that, or if we can unpack the language that we should be using as allies.
That's an interesting concept, and thinking of it as people of culture. I think I've always just, when it comes to language, I think from a lot of other white friends that I have and talking to them about this subject, I think there's always a fear of being direct in terms of language, and being intentional about which group you're talking about or speaking about, because it might be considered offensive or things of that nature. And or they assume that it's considered offensive, whereas I think that's where the birth of the idea of, oh, I'm colorblind, I'm like, I don't see color, whereas that's just all that is. Instead of just being offensive, not only is that offensive, that is an erasure of people's cultures and colors, and where you're from. And you're saying, and you're only able to say, I don't see color, when you have the privilege of not acknowledging somebody's background. But for me, I've always never had a specific feeling of whether or not people say people of color or people of culture or whatever it is, but I just wanted people to be more specific when talking about it. For example, when we're talking specifically about anti-Black racism, it's okay to specifically talk about Black people versus having the umbrella term of people of color. If we're talking about issues as it relates to Black people right now, we are talking about that right now. If we're talking about with the spread of COVID-19 and the reaction to different Chinese American experiences and how people are treating Chinese Americans, and different Chinese restaurants and things of that nature closing down because of racism. In that way, we're specifically talking about Chinese Americans. We're not talking about people of color as a whole. And I think that acknowledgement does not harm the groups in which you're supporting. If anything, it shows that you are being intentional and saying, I'm talking about you and we're seeing you specifically, versus trying to put everyone and everything at once at one time and just say, okay, all of you, we were just talking about seeing all of you, even though we know this specific problem is happening only to this community. I think being intentional about being direct with your words is very important.
Yeah, just to add something quickly to that, if that's the same question, and everything Charisse said is she hit the nail on the head, the point. I'm like, what is
that? That's right.
Right? No, there was a tweet that I loved by Carlos A. Rodriguez, and I'm sure it's circulating around. And he goes, "I see no color is not the goal. The goal is I see your color and I honor you. I value your input. I will be educated about your lived experiences. I will work against the racism that harms you. You are beautiful. Tell me how to do better." That's the goal. And having these conversations now, and when people often say I'm human and I see no color, it is their way of being like, in a really twisted way, or not twisted, but it's not acknowledging things for what it is. It's not naming things for what it is, and it's also their way of saying I'm with you. I see you, but you're like no. But you can see me in my color. It is very, very important. And people get very uncomfortable with that. And institutions, we can see that there are certain sectors today. I mean, the private sector in America has been very vocal, most of them. Either they're doing it because they're really in solidarity, or this is part of a broader marketing scheme, whatever. I'm not going to question their intentions, but there's certain specific sectors that are working around community engagement, working around international development and things like that, that refuse to call a spade, to say that this is anti-Black racism. They're all for racism and justice, but this is where, for me, language is super important. If we look at the last couple of years, we've all become scientists and doctors. COVID has taught us about hydroxychloroquine, whatever, all the words, right? We have the lingo down. Do you do your antibody test? We're being educated on things. I think the state of America in the last 3 years in your current government has forced people to be politically educated. And so things that you would often have experts really understanding are now being discussed because it's affecting certain communities in a real way. We see that with COVID and the global pandemic. People are using very clinical terms and integrating it in their regular discussion. Now, when it comes to what we're experiencing right now, to me, there are layers. As an ally, let us have the discussion about how you don't see color, let's unpack that. It's important that you pick the right language at the right time, because that is part of active solidarity. For institutions, right, that are regulated by treaties and regulated by HR policies, it is incredibly important that they name this for what it is. It is anti-Black racism. We can deal with racism in totality, but to say anti-Black racism for me is so critical, because it acknowledges that people of color can also be discriminatory against Black people. And that means when we're having diversity training, inclusion training, it's not a black and white thing. It is much more complicated. We need to look at this from an intersectional perspective, and we're forcing them to do the hard work. And they're like, no, we're going to couch this under racism. No. You're going to center Black lives, Black realities, Black bodies, because we're dying here. And sometimes it is not Joe from Minnesota that has Swedish background. It is, or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just being flippant. It is perhaps, Sister Sunita from India right now that is killing me. and anti-Blackness isn't just people of African or descendants. It is anyone that presents as Black. It is South Asian people who present as Black. It is Latin. Anyone that presents as Black within their own communities face the same level of discrimination. So we've been repeating this. We've been telling people for years how to be allies. We've been asking institutions to put their money where their mouth is, and they're not. And if there's ever a time for us to demand it unapologetically and shift and bother them until they shift it, it is now. It is absolutely now. I don't know when another moment like this will arise. So I'm gonna tell you something. I'm gonna ride this as far as we can, and let us start pulling every lever that we can as allies, as Black people, to shift, just to make one shift in this moment.
You hit the nail on the head with that. Oof. Especially the fact that anti-Black racism can be from not just white people. It can be from other people of color as well. So that's very important to acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. And be intentional about it.
Yes, 100%. I want to speak to your experience, or to the anti-Blackness experience that you've experienced, Fatou, on a global level. I want to read out a quote by an artist named Hank Willis Thomas, the co-founder of the Four Freedoms organization that we at Resilience have been a part of. He says, the craziest thing about Blackness is that Black people didn't create it. Europeans with a commercial interest in dehumanizing us created Black people. 500 years ago in Africa, there weren't Black people. There were people, and those people were from hundreds of different cultures, religions, worldviews, and ethnicities. It is only in the context of the United States that we become this uniform monolith. I guess my question is, in your experience in navigating your Blackness Fatou outside of the US and within the US, and maybe even with the language that you find yourself using differently or maybe not, I'm curious as to what you can share about the global experience of Blackness versus the American experience.
That's a really, thanks, Noor. And you and I have had many conversations around that, because I am, my many identities conflict all the time. I'm Black, African, I'm a woman, and I'm Muslim. And my girlfriend, who is on in here today as well, Rania, she comes from North Africa. I come from Sub-Saharan Africa, Black Africa. And what does that even mean, right? When all the lines of everything, we know that race is a social construct. We know that, you know, colonialism divided, came and just pulled us. We know the history. But what does that mean in being, what does that mean to my life? And I wonder if I think my sister's even on this call. You know, what is happening in America hits my sisters and I very deeply. And one of my really good girlfriends, African-American, called me the other day and she was like, I just want to thank you for standing in solidarity with Black Americans at this moment. And I said, well, anti-Blackness is, it reverberates outside of America. We are seeing the protests, riots, whatever, the protests spark here, but it is so real across the world. You know, growing up as a Black woman, Muslim, when I lived in North Africa, you know, the same anti-Blackness rhetoric really deepened by colonialism and all of that shit was, you are Black, you are a slave, and you're a prostitute. So your gender and your sexuality and your color were attacked. So from ages 11 all the way to 15, all the way from my time in North Africa, my time in the Middle East, my time in Southeast Asia, in East Asia, and then in Europe, and then coming to the United States like a week after 9/11, living in Manassas, Virginia, of all places. Anti-Blackness is the core. Like the experiences of that are so deeply real. Sometimes, you know, my Muslim name can protect me or can at least give me an inside perspective when I'm in the Middle East. They might just be like, oh, you're Black and you're probably a slave and we don't really like you, but you're Muslim, so I got you. Or if I'm in South Asia, like I was saying to Charisse, I really wanted to have an American accent because that was the protection that I could have. You know, if you're just African and you sound like this and you're like, hi, I'm here, they're like, you are just the level of Black we cannot deal with. But if I'm like, oh my God, I'm like from New York, they're just like, we welcome you, our American sister, right? So all the ways in which identity comes into play, but at the bottom of it, you know, my interactions with people and how in which they see Blackness and not understanding that it is informed, it is by design, it is their own colonial legacies that are informing the lens in which they see me, was really difficult to understand. The fact that, and then to come to America and be African. Remember, it's now that it's cool to be African, y'all. You know, back in the days we were called booty scratchers. You know, there was a divide between Black Americans and Africans, and that was also by design. If we look at in the 60s and the 70s, thinking about the Pan-Africanist movements, as African nations were looking for their liberation, and we're seeing the revolution here in the United States, we're seeing what's happening in Haiti. You had Black people from Nkrumah to Marcus Garvey to Du Bois to Malcolm X, wherever, from the Caribbean, from Latin America, from Africa. These Black folks were working together saying that we need to be self-sufficient as a Black peoples. And so what does white supremacy do? It divides. It says, no, Black in America is better than Black in Africa. Black in this means this, you know, and within that, we have a whole colorism conversation to have. The layers, guys, are deep. And the conditioning is inherently deep. And so for me, I feel every loss that has happened in America. I feel you know, when I'm walking down the streets and if something were to happen to me, they're gonna be like, oh, are you Sierra Leonean? Black is Black, y'all. Black is Black. period. And so I'm just sharing a bit of my experiences to say to you that the reason why and the way in which we are even trying to represent this and why we stand in solidarity with Black lives in America is because we're having the same conversations about Black lives in the UK, Black lives in Sweden, Black lives in Paris, Black lives in the Middle East, Black lives in Southeast Asia, Black lives in Brazil, in Latin America, in South America. It is real. And so if there is ever a time for me that we begin to look at transnational coalition building, right? That whatever we're saying we need from allies here in the United States is the same that we need from allies in every corner of the world. We need to be able to really build across borders because our struggles are similar. They just manifest in different socioeconomic structures, you know? So, you know, today Charisse and I have met. I'm like I said, how do I continue to start supporting my sisters and my brothers in this country, knowing that they're also going to support the cause outside of America? Because I am telling you, you know, it is a very real experience to understand what it means to be Black and to be in this embodiment and to understand how violence and violation touches every inch of your reality because of the color of your skin. It is real in America. It is real everywhere else in the world for Black people.
Yes, thank you.
Charisse? I'd love to vibe off you on that. You know what I mean? Like, because you travel a lot too. You know, we were talking about this.
We were literally, it's funny because we were just talking about this, about like before this call started, about just the dynamics of Blackness and across the diaspora. And we were talking about our travel experiences. And for me, I have had what was really uncomfortable for me in traveling to Europe and East Asia, and even slightly in Latin America, is feeling that for the first time ever, my nationality meant something more than my Blackness in a very strange way to me. So for me, being an American, like Black, I'm very much so Black and proud and all that, and people could see that, and then there's reactions to that, and there's racism, and there's this, that, and the third, and there's sexism, there's all of those things being in America, and no one's looking at you as a Black person in America and being like, oh, you're Panamanian? Okay, so you're a different type of Black. No one's looking at it from that discrimination standpoint as segregating the Blackness. But when I went to London and tried to get food at a restaurant before going off to see a show in the West End and waited forever to get a table and then said to the waiter, hello, like, are these tables open? All of a sudden, the body language is different. The disposition's different because, oh, they hear this very clear American Northeast accent and seeing, okay, oh, never mind. Oh, you were gonna actually, and I'm like, oh, hold on, I don't want to eat there anymore because I'm realizing what it is that is happening. And it happens the same thing in South Korea. I speak Korean pretty well. And so navigating in South Korea was really easy for me. But I would have people asking like, oh, are you Nigerian? And I'm like, no, I'm American, hello. And then the disposition is different. And that's really unnerving because the fact that my Blackness is not any different, and it's uncomfortable and it's very strange to try to be treated differently as a Black person than someone else who is from Ghana or from Nigeria or wherever on the continent, knowing that we would be treated just as equally bad in America. And that those experiences are, it was an eye-opening thing for me going abroad and seeing that, like, not to say that I never experienced any hints of discrimination or weirdness, but people also associate American Blackness with a sense of cool and culture and hip hop and R&B. And when I was in Korea, people were like, oh my God, Brooklyn, yes, Biggie. And it was very much that. And like, wait. So again, it's an association with Black American culture, but not necessarily a respect for the people or the peoples, but just a respect and just a love and adoration for the culture itself. But when it comes to the actual people and the better treatment of people, it's not the same. It's not that, it's not where it should be. It's just, again, similar to America, but almost at a heightened level because America's biggest export is its culture across the board in other places. And that's especially true for Black American culture, that the way in which it's dissected and dissolved and picked at in America, it's done the same thing abroad. It's the same exact thing abroad. And so you're feeling that. I felt that difference. I feel that difference every single time I go abroad. And I always think about, okay, how do I rectify, and even in myself, in that privilege of that being an American Black person when I'm abroad, and a privilege I never expected to have, because American Blackness in America is frustrating. And then going abroad and having a sense of privilege for being American, how do I then use that and whenever I'm abroad to mean something different? So that's something that I constantly think about, because it is so strange. It is such a weird experience to have that kind of difference from someone of color from you, knowing that that would never happen in your home country. It just would never happen.
I also, if I could, just wanted to share. So I'm Black, I'm also Asian, and I lived in Shanghai for a year when I was 16. And the anti-Black racism that I experienced there was obviously invalidating, but having conversations about anti-Black racism with family. So there's the dismantling, right, of the idea. And then there's the institutions, and there's also the interpersonal work that needs to be done. And so intersectionality is complex and messy. And it was mentioned earlier, I don't know that I will have an as wide open door as I have now to start some really difficult conversations of unpacking personally my internalized anti-Black racism as a Black person, and then being able to work in a way to engage my family members to unpack. So it's complicated, but traveling abroad and stepping into a space is surreal.
Yes, thank you for that, for to all of you. It's you raised the important point of like that anti-racism is a muscle that we need to work and practice on a daily basis, versus like, oh, I read this book and listened to this podcast and I did my thing. And I want to refer to a stat that Jamie shared in the chat, in terms of the global perspective in a number. In 2017, the global skin lightening industry was worth $4.8 billion, and it's projected to grow to 8.9 billion by 2027. I mean, I remember growing up in Jordan as a child, seeing skin lightening, it was called Fair and Lovely. For those that spent time in the Middle East, I'm sure that you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I had to do a lot of anti-racism work myself because the white body was glorified so much in all culture that was consumed, whether it was through music or film or the billboards. So this is real work that we all need to be doing on a moment-by-moment basis, not even day-to-day. It's for the culture, not the people. Yes, okay. I want to invite everyone to please share in some of your questions as well. I want to refer to something that Fatou mentioned about design, about injustice being by design, of course, and the systems were designed the way that they are. Certain words that we use in our vocabulary were also introduced by design. And there's a lot of unlearning that needs to take place. And with that, if we were to design, because we are in the business of the future here at Resilience, what will it take for us to design an anti-racist future over the next 12 years? Fatou, your face. I mean, I want to refer to your point also about global citizenship, really, which is something that is one of our main goals at Resilience as well. But maybe to simplify it and looking at the next 12 years and what it will take for us as a community, as a transnational coalition, to refer to something you outlined, Fatou. Yeah, what will it take for us to create that future? What is something that you hope will be part of our future everyday lives in the year 2032?
I mean, Charisse, you can go, girl. Like,
I'll sit here like I don't even. It's bad. I mean, before you even think about the future, let me think about now. What a lot of things look like now that I would love to see.
The future is now.
Yes, the future is now. Like, where do I want to see shifted from now into the future? I think one thing that's been really harboring on my heart right now is just how much Black communities are underserved but over-policed. So specifically underserved but over-policed. So thinking about the just in different Black communities across the United States, how education, how healthcare, how even job opportunities, how those things are just so sparse and destroyed in so many areas in so many ways, and yet that keeps Black communities confined. But yet we see such a heavy amount of police presence in these communities. I don't know that many white people that I know that are in predominantly white environments that can say that they've seen a police van just sit on their block every single day, and not really those police officers not really interacting with the community. They're not engaging with the community and volunteering and doing things. It's just a menacing presence constantly every single day. In Flatbush in New York. So Flatbush, in Canarsie, in Bed-Stuy, in East New York, in Brownsville, and East Harlem, all of those different areas, you're seeing such a heavy police presence, and what that can do to people, especially knowing that, at least from Black people I know, we don't really call the police for help. We don't really call the police for assistance for anything. We do not, they are so heavily involved in our communities, but yet we do not call the police for anything. I've only ever called the police and specifically asked for an EMT, not for a police presence, because we know that could be a step towards violence. Can be the person even calling could be wrongfully assumed to be the one that is the target. Even the fact that I'm using the word target shows how ingrained that feeling is of being like, it's never been a space, or policing has never felt like a warm hug. It's never felt comforting. It's never felt okay to see a police officer walk down the street without having a deep sense of fear in my body. And I think about what that looks like in the future, and figuring out how to best, one, I firmly believe in defunding the police, and thinking about how many millions upon billions of dollars are given to police forces every single year, and is there a way that we can redirect those funds to other different community efforts? Is there a way to redirect those funds towards education, specifically in these underserved communities? Is there a way to just being able to bring the community together in a different way? Is there even a way to say, all right, for police forces, you have to have a certain amount of volunteer hours outside of uniform in which you cannot make citizens arrest. So you must interact with the community from a human perspective without having your badge, without being in that menacing space. Is there a way to do that? Like, I think about all of those things in moving forward, because it's going to be a gradual thing. And we're seeing we're having a very intense moment right now that was bound to happen at some point. And with COVID, plus feeling that anti-Black racism with a pandemic that specifically that is disproportionately affecting Black communities because of who is essential workers, because of different health conditions like asthma, like diabetes, like not lupus, oh my God, thyroid disease, all these different things that are then affecting the Black community and associating with COVID. It's just so much that I'm like, I would love to see gradual shifts in a very tangible action item. We're going to do this differently. We're going to move to more community policing. We're going to move towards doing this in the community. We're going to move towards more education of our police officers or our police force, whatever it is, to be able to feel like in 2032 that I can confidently call a police officer and not be worried that the result's going to be different. That I can confidently see the police in any neighborhood and feel secure and not afraid. That is years of just trauma that needs to be unworked, and intentionally so. It cannot be by a minority of people either. It needs to be the vast majority of people acknowledging that this is a system in which was never designed for Black people. It was never designed to uplift Black people. Therefore, it needs to be changed. It's not about going back and like, this is what America's built on. America was built to work like the way it is right now. Let's be perfectly clear. It was built to work the way it is right now. So it's time to unwork those systems and create things that are more effective and put in place new systems that actually do serve all the people. Yeah, that's my general feeling about that.
Before I respond to that, there's so many people speaking to what I am actually going to jump off Charisse's point. Makeda, you wrote in the comment, you among other people, something around education. I would just love to maybe just expound on like what you wrote, because I think it feeds into sort of what my envisioning is, or my hope really is for all of us.
Sure, it's Makeda.
Makeda, I'm so sorry.
We're all learning new names. So I was trying to get my thoughts together, but I was thinking that in schools and thinking about the school to prison pipeline, that it starts so young and working in curriculum. I feel like the curriculum is written for the adults to teach the students, but we need curriculum to teach the adults. The adults need to learn, and the adults need to be continuously checking their bias. There's just so much unpacking that there's the focus has been on academics, and Charisse, you mentioned the systems weren't designed for us to succeed in schools. We're designed, the statistics that we have now about graduations, the statistics we have about reading, literacy, and math skills, it was designed that way. The systems were designed in a way to not funnel the appropriate and necessary funding and support to empower. I think I'm all over the place, but I just feel like there needs to be like scaffolded racial literacy that happens for not just administrators, but also for school safety, school safety, and the everyone in the ecosystem. Everyone in the ecosystem in an educational space should be learning about their own biases and their own work that they need to be doing. I think affinity groups would be a great place to unpack so that there is an opportunity to continue in courageous conversations, because we're all new to speaking to each other in this way. So if you're in the Black community, this may not be a new conversation for you, but in speaking in a professional space, there's been a lot of fear, at least I've experienced, I'll speak for myself, a lot of this job or this career. And I've started moving away from working in organizations that don't hold the space for me to speak my truth. And that's difficult. And we can do difficult things. So I think I was just thinking that this idea of what it means to be an American, we need to rethink what that means, what the objective is in our learning, and as educators, the work that we're doing in educating ourselves continuously. So
thank you. I read the comment, and a lot of people are just really resonating with that, and it resonated with me, and it's been something I have always felt is not in a UN development way where it's like through education you find your liberation, but it was very clear to me at age 19, and the reason why it was clear to me is that living in the world, all around the world like I have, growing up, not by choice, just sort of happened by, I guess some may call it privilege, and experiencing incredible levels of racism, anti-Black racism and sexism all at once, and anti-religion, right? Because we've seen a growth in Islamophobia over the years, etc. I quickly, even when I didn't have the language to say these things and call sexism for what it was or understand what feminism was, I just knew that this was unjust and we had to dismantle these power structures that were inhibiting my full potential as a woman. And so, very much a feminist from the get-go. The reason I bring this is it will come back to where we are. So in the search for feminist feminist teachings and learnings. And remember, my upbringing, and like many of us, our educational system are very Eurocentric, right? They come from a specific perspective and a specific gaze. But in trying to break through and find things around gender equality, the book that I held on to the most was Jane Eyre and the Bronte sisters. I'm like, these are my people. Sylvia Plath is my people. You know, all of this stuff. And Jane Eyre was it. And I was like, who is this Bertha? Bertha is this crazy woman from the Caribbean in this book. Oh my God, I hate Bertha because she's making Jane Eyre's life a living hell, right? Then I go to college. When we think about education and where it starts and the indoctrination and where I think we need to be in 2032. I go to college, and the first book my professor took me, and I, you know, super liberal arts college in Canada, love Canada for many different reasons, and was Jean Reese's book, Wide Saragossa Sea. Wide Saragossa Sea takes Bertha from Jane Eyre and centers her in the entire book. Bertha is a Black woman. All of a sudden, for the many years I read Jane Eyre, I thought Bertha was the crazy heifer who was making Jane Eyre's life a living hell. Yet Bertha is a product, right, of colonialism, of slavery, of rape. And her voice is silenced, and we know nothing about her. And then this woman of color comes and she centers her in the story, and she changes my life completely. That was where I started my re-education on racism in the world, understanding that the way in which I have learned, the lens in which I see the world comes from a colonial Eurocentric perspective. I went back and I had to relearn, unlearn, to understand, to like, it's a process. But that intentionality is not what all of us had. I didn't grow up with books that we have today around Black girls, right? I hated Barbies because Barbie wasn't me, but I didn't know how to express that. History said that this is what happened in America, this is what happened with Africans, but that is one history. Right? And so it comes down to rhetoric, it comes down to discourse. We are at a point where we're creating books and we're rewriting a history, and we're saying there are many versions of this history. It is happening now. Our children, this generation, if we begin to institutionalize this knowledge, diversify the knowledge and the ways in which our lens are shaped, I am telling you, we will reduce the amount of anti-racism work we need to do in 2032, because people are being raised understanding the complexity of the complexity of humanity. They will see themselves in history not as passive recipients of things that happened to them, but as active agents who resisted, shaped science, shaped discourse, shaped thought, that they are powerful and smart. They will understand that Bertha, from the beginning, Bertha is a human being. Bertha was subjugated. Bertha matters, right? And so when we get to 2032, you have a generation of woke people, because just like how patriarchy serves no one, men or women, neither does white supremacy, neither does racism. It fails all of us. So for me, my envisioning is always destroy all the history books, destroy everything we have right now. Like, it's makes no sense, it's not applicable, it is one-sided, it is problematic, it is what fuels anti-Blackness, it is what fuels racist ideology. Let us rewrite it. And I am telling you, and my vision and my hope is that at 2032, we have the language, we have the nuance, we have the confidence, not always fueled by trauma, not always fueled by pain and anger, but we have the language to come to the table and say, let us have a conversation.
Oh, no, speaking of in relation to education, I want to jump in really quickly. I don't know if everyone's heard of this woman. Her name is Nikole Hannah-Jones, spelled with a K, Nikole, Nikole Hannah-Jones. And she's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist and writer, which she created the 1619 Project by the New York Times. And she's also known for her work on writing on segregation in education. And I'm gonna put in the chat, she wrote one specific article about choosing a school for my daughter in a segregated city, and how it's called Choosing a School for My Daughter in a Segregated City, how one school became a battleground over which children benefit from a separate and unequal system. She's talking about specifically in New York. But her writing on education to me is like must read for anyone who's interested in learning about how to, one, how the systems already are as it relates to education, and what the possibilities of what they could be. And she's a phenomenal Black writer. So I'll link some of the work that she does in the chat, but just wanted to lift up her name because she's absolutely incredible.
Wow. I feel like there should be a mic drop after that. That was so powerful. It's like, it's not about creating a seat at the table, but it's about like dismantling the table that exists and creating a new one and a bigger one. Yes, I'm at a loss for words because that was really profound and powerful. And the way that we learn history is really powerful, and the way that we unlearn it is even more important. And as we as we look to the future and in the present, I think that even connecting with our own ancestry, with our own legacies, and because so many of us also, we have been fed our own histories through a white lens, and I think that that's very problematic. And so how do we decolonize the way that we receive information, and decolonize our language and our stories, is such an important message that I feel like was so strong in today's conversation. Christy, did I miss, because I haven't been keeping up with the chat as well. Have I missed any questions from the chat?
Mostly people just sharing more wisdom and comments on all of the amazing stuff that's been shared. Yeah, if anyone has a question specifically, there is a raise hand function. So feel free to click on the participants window and raise hand, and we'll be happy to call on you and let you ask your question directly.
Yeah. Jamie is asking Makeda to talk about STREAM. So for those that were in our Future of Education conversation, Makeda was a panelist and she is an education expert. Makeda, what are your thoughts about STREAM, or if you can kind of reintroduce the concept of STREAM through the lens of this conversation today?
Sure, I can unpack a little bit. So there's in curriculum been a movement to focus on STEM. So that's science, technology, engineering, and math. And in the recent years, they've added art. So STEAM. And something that I've been thinking about is adding an R to that, and the R standing for revision, or maybe in these times, revolution, who knows? But just thinking about again, just coming back to the objective of education, or coming back to the objective of why we gather together in community to build. What are we building? And I've been hearing a lot of conversations about getting back to normal, and that's terrifying. I don't want to go back to normal. I don't want to go back into schools and stress kids out about answering a standardized test that has very little meaning in their life. And so thinking about revising how we're using education. And for instance, for math, I always think about, why aren't we having young people use statistics about inequity to create data visualizations so that kids, youth culture enjoys memes and visual ways? Why aren't we having students think about things that aren't working around the world and tinker with our problems around the world and create science problems? What happened to science fairs? We need a global transnational coalition of science to start using the inherent wisdom of young people without the shackles of colonization, to think about how we can build a future. And I'm so inspired by the youth organizations that I've been able to connect to, because they're not clear, or they are clear about the importance of taking action. And I think they're a little bit more fluid in talking about identity politics and holding the space for different, the spectrum and the depth and the intersectionality and the fluidity of each of us as individuals. So that R is something I've just been trying to continue encouraging people to do, is revise the words. Or when you hear something and you have like that moment, that's a good time to think about what was said, who said it, who am I, and now that I've paused for those moments, what might be a way for me to respond? Not react, but to actually pause and think about the perspectives in the room, think about the perspectives that aren't in the room. So that's that R, is just revise what we're focusing and what we're resting our attention on.
Thank you for sharing that, Makeda. I want to ask our panelists to share their calls to action for people listening and people who may watch this later. And these calls to actions will also be part of our story world. Just as a note. Yes, there's a lot of there are a lot of call to actions that are circulating online, and you know, whether it's donating money, or it's showing up at the protest, or it's calling a legislator. What are the call to actions that speak to you in this moment that you would like our community to know of?
For me, I think what I try to focus on is, as a call to action, is one, educating yourself, and then also speaking to those around you from your community about these things. So number one, in educating yourself, that is looking online. There's so many different lists of great books to read, documentaries to watch, films to watch, ways. And there's Rachel Elizabeth Cargyle on Instagram has a whole course called The Great Unlearn, just about unlearning these different racial biases in which we have. So educating yourself and being okay with how uncomfortable that's going to be at first. It's going to be very uncomfortable. It's a constant unlearning process. And it's going to challenge the way in which you've always thought. And so doing that, but also then speaking to those around you. I think so many people, and I'm going to specifically point out white people with this, are uncomfortable with talking to other white people about race. They will have no problem talking to me about race and feeling like, oh, hey, Charisse, girl, I stand with you. I cannot believe these things are happening. I'm so sorry. What can I do to help you? People are super fine with doing that because it makes them look like an ally. What people are afraid to do is talk to their friend group, talk to their teammates, talk to their parents, uncles, grandma, whatever, their boss, their coworker, when they're saying things that are out of pocket and out of line, or have an opinion that maybe feels uncomfortable. And you're like, oh, that doesn't sound right. They're uncomfortable with speaking and having that voice. And here's why that's detrimental. One, a lot of times when I'm walking into spaces with white people and talking about race, people see me as having something to gain from the conversation. So they see me as a Black person who has something to gain from the conversation of changing their minds, and are therefore looking at me from a different angle. If you are coming from the same community, same playing field, people are more likely to listen to you. So when you are refusing or feeling too uncomfortable to say something, you are then trying to put the pressure on the people who did not create racism to fix racism, versus being an active participant and really being an ally in spaces in which Black people are not present. How are you speaking out and using your voice when there are no Black people to cheer you on and say, good job, thank you for being a good ally? What are you doing in those spaces? Also, in piggybacking on that, your feeling of being uncomfortable does not trump my fear of death. Does not trump my fear of police brutality, of discrimination, of racism. Black people I've been uncomfortable. I've had to learn how to be uncomfortable all of my life, because in America it's impossible as a Black person to succeed without putting yourself in white spaces a lot of times, and knowing how to navigate and move through the rooms and have weird conversations and maybe be out of your comfort zone. We're used to doing that. Now it's really time for everyone else to learn how to do that as well, and be okay with being uncomfortable, and be okay with being comfortable, and realizing that the fact that you're now learning how to be uncomfortable as it relates to race is a privilege. It's a privilege to be able to navigate through the world and be in your circles and never really have to talk about race. with people that you've lived with your whole life, people you've grown up around, the kids you went to school with all your life, your neighbors. And it's a privilege to walk through life and not have to do that. So going back and just summarizing, my call to actions is educating yourself and then being willing to speak to others like you about these things, not just to the communities in which you want to prove your allyship with. This is for, we need you to also speak up for us in spaces in which we are not present to be able to dismantle those systems. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Jamie just shared about the Alex Ohanian from Reddit that
yes, I meant to mention him. Yes, Alex is doing that. I love it. I love it. Alexis Ohanian, he's doing that. Yes. Oh God.
Maybe she had something to do with it. Just saying.
He's amazing. He's literally, I've been thinking about literal call to actions as somebody who's literally putting everything out there. He took himself off the board of Reddit, which was Reddit is a platform that he co-founded, took himself off the board of it and wants a Black person to then take his place. And that is quite literally just finding a small way, which Reddit is oftentimes known for having a lot of crazy chat rooms and things of that nature that are very racist and can skew different ways. And he's been so intentional about doing that, along with also donating $1 million to Colin Kaepernick's Know Your Rights Foundation. That's in a very large, grand way of somebody stepping in and doing more than just saying Black Lives Matter, but trying to find ways to infiltrate the systems that we were never designed to occupy.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that he's also giving away power and wealth by doing that, and that's something else. We need to get comfortable with equal distribution of power and wealth. Fatou?
Yeah, no, and I think that's what it is. I think for me, just answering this question and segueing from Alexis Ohanian, as we all know, I'm really bad at pronunciation, so I hope that's what his name is. Serena's man, that single act, because if you think about donation, Michael Jordan standing up 100 million, finally, you go you, right? People are resource, money, power, where you invest it shifts everything. But what Alexis did to me, did for me with stepping down from Reddit, at the end of the day, that single act is saying that in my opinion, his white man self is saying, I am ready to give power away. Everything we're doing is about power. And so this is why, when you say, what's your call to action? My call to action, I have a very specific target audience, young people and Black people. Personally, I don't got time for white people no more because they're not about to give up their power. They're not trying to. How do you take power from somebody that is like, systems are designed for you to win. History is written for you and you're the winner. You don't have to work very hard. People are just offering jobs to you. You can go from an intern to a CEO in 2 years. Why would you want to give that up? Like, people know. White people know what's good. Like, I don't know how many times we have to re-educate. So they're not my focus. No offense. I'm tired. I'm done. My target audience is young people and Black people. This Black girl grew up in the 80s, not seeing herself in media, in literature, in books, in history. In fact, when she did see herself, her flat nose, thick mouth, brown skin was constructed as not beautiful, as subpar. Toni Morrison's book, The Bluest Eye, was the first piece of literature a Black woman who writes for Black communities looked, and she articulated and crystallized what I was seeing when I see whiteness in my life. And she reflected that back to me and said, you are beautiful. To me, to then live here, to be in this moment now in 2020, wherein I know if I were to have a child today, there is enough Black children's books, there are enough fantastic movies that demonstrate our humanity, there are enough businesses around the world, not just in the United States, that my Black children can connect to is powerful. So my call to action is we keep doing it. We keep doing it better. We keep doing it more intentionally. We keep supporting it, period. We do it unapologetically. We don't try to be comfortable. What game are we trying to play? At the end of the day, are they going to give us power? No. The only way power is going to exchange, be shifted, is through violence, period. If we don't want to call it for what it is what it is. It's violence meets violence, period. So as that is happening, what are we going to do? We continue to be unapologetically Black. We continue to do things that we've always done. We've been doing the educating. We've been doing the assimilating. We've been creating Black wealth. We've been creating systems for everyone to thrive. We continue to do that, and we make a whole lot more noise around it. Secondly, youth. Youth, blanket term. Young people all around the world. It is young people that always are at the forefront of protest. The Arab Spring, young university students. What happened in my own country, Sierra Leone? A call for a reformation, a call for a pushback on colonialism. Young people. If it is the same young people that embraced Greta Thunberg, it's the same young people that all of a sudden are saying our world matters, and it is the same young people that are going to say, actually, racism, anti-racism, anti-Blackness matters to us, and we want to shift that. They are the people we need to be educating. They're the people we need to be investing in. They're the people we need to be nourishing. It is young people that said these gun laws have to change. So for me, I'm like, where is there hope? And how do we support that piece of hope? And how do we gestate it, nurture it, affirm it, legitimize it? And do it in such a way where when we get to 2032, these young people, not my generation, the generation before, are designing and are reimagining a more equitable world. You know, my work is for my people. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna apologize for it. It is about my people, period.
Yes. Thank you, Fatou. Those people are the people that we are at Resilience. They are our audience as well. And they are the ones that we are we are inviting to write the story with us, to carry the narrative with us, and to like create that 2032 future. As you were sharing, even when you mentioned Greta Thunberg, in our conversations about climate change, which come up, of course, a lot. And almost in every conversation we had, whether it was on education or the future of technology or data privacy, racism came up across the board. And that's something that I think we need to be connecting as well with our narrative, like showing the interconnectedness of justice and our fight in or intent in redesigning the systems that are not the current systems that are not serving us or serving humanity. Makeda, do you want to share a call to action?
I would just say that if you're here for this conversation, if you're here in this time in history, that you were made for this, and you are in the body and the socioeconomic status and the sexuality and all of the different gifts and challenges that you have, you're made for this. And so survival is in our DNA, and everything that we need for positive change is here. And just naming that there's grief happening. Of course, yes, for the Black community, the veil has been lifted and the world can see that, but there's also grief, I think, that's happening for white people. There's a loss of identity. And so my call to action is to return to the breath and return to awareness of the body, and to sit with it and not bypass the work, and take deep breaths through the work, because every breath is a gift that not everyone has been afforded to this date. And so moving forward into futurist thinking, this isn't sustainable. So return to the breath is my call to action.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Charisse, Fatou, Makeda, so much for sharing yourselves with us and your leadership. We need it in these moments, and we look forward to you guiding us all. And thank you for being with us in this space. And thank you all for joining and spending Saturday with us. The next 15 minutes are a space for reflection. We usually go into our creative exercise. And today we are going to kind of break into groups and reflect and maybe even write.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Christy.
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate, like, yeah, thank you. I had so many moments in this conversation where I had chills, and I look forward to sharing so many quotable moments from everything that you guys shared. And I want to iterate to everyone who's here that our goal and our purpose for this experience is to create a platform where you all can have a voice in what our future looks like and how we build it, and that we can all collectively reflect on both the things that we hope for the future and the complexity and fears around how well-intentioned actions can go wrong. So we want you to be as active, to be very active in the process of writing this story. And that is why we do our creative exercise every week. That is also why we host our Tuesday open writers room that we hope you'll join us for. 6 p.m. Eastern. I just shared some links in the chat, and I will also re-copy and paste the links for all of our speakers. If you are able to join us for the next 15 minutes, I want us to start with just some individual personal reflection on what is your vision for the future. And then we will break out into small groups and just talk about it together and share with each other what those visions are.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, just a quick note that you can, yes, follow us all and follow Charisse Fatou and Makeda and Springbrooks as well. Amplify their messages and follow their work and support them with your money as well in whatever way they ask you to. Yeah, with that, we hope to see you in our writers' room on Tuesday. And
yeah, I'm going to stop the stream. If anyone, I should have prepared this